Understanding ought to, an essential tool for giving and receiving advice. Hello, language learners. Welcome back to our series on mastering the use of modal verbs in English. Today, we'll be focusing on the phrase, ought to, a powerful tool in your English language toolbox, specifically when it comes to giving and receiving advice. It's a less common but very useful phrase, so let's get started. In the world of English grammar, ought to serves a similar purpose to should. It's used to give advice, suggest an action, or say what we think is the right thing to do. However, it tends to be a bit more formal and less frequently used than should. For example, if you say, "You ought to study for the exam," you're giving advice about what you believe is the right action. When someone gives you advice using ought to, there are several ways you can respond. Your response can show agreement, disagreement, or just acknowledgement. 1. Agreement. If you agree with the advice, you can say, "Yes, I ought to do that." This means you agree that the advised action is a good idea. 2. Disagreement. If you don't agree, you can say, "No, I ought not to do that." However, this is very formal and not common in conversation. Instead, you might say, "I don't think I should do that." 3. Acknowledgement. You can also simply acknowledge the advice by saying, I ought to consider that." Here you are neither agreeing nor disagreeing, just noting the advice. Now, let's practice. Here are some situations. 1. Your friend says, "You ought to visit Rome. It's beautiful." How would you respond if you agree? Disagree? Or just want to acknowledge? 2. Someone advises, "You ought to apply for that job. It's perfect for you." How would you respond in this case? Try practicing these scenarios with the different responses. The more you practice, the more naturally ought to will come to you. And that wraps up our lesson on the phrase, ought to. It's a small phrase, but a powerful one, especially when you want to sound polite and formal. As always, keep practicing, and you'll become more comfortable with using ought to in no time. Remember, language learning is a journey, and every step, no matter how small, brings you closer to fluency. So, keep going, and you ought to be proud of your progress. Until next time.